Hello, and welcome to the Bear With Me podcast. This is Sebastian DeWarren, the youngest candidate running for governor of California 2026. And today, for the podcast, we have a special guest called Alexis Claiborne. She is running for Congress for District 23, and today we're going to hear all her thoughts on opening the conversation across the political aisle. What does a representative in Congress actually do? And what are her general thoughts on managing her district in California and who her opposition is? So she is progressive, and progressive means forward, and she really embodies what forwards means. So let's get to it. Hello, Alexis, and thank you so much for being part of the Bear With Me podcast. So first off, I was wondering if you could give me a quick summary about who you are and what you're running for and your background.
Yes, so my name's Alexis Claiborne. I am running for the U.S. House of Representatives in California's 23rd District in the 2026 midterms. And my background, I come from the nonprofit sector, so I have spent my entire career trying to provide direct services to our communities and also uplift voices for folks that typically haven't had a seat at the table. And that's exactly what I want to do on the federal level. Not assuming when I win this election.
Exactly. Great. I love that response. So giving a voice to people, and I assume that that's part of the job for running for Congress. So could you maybe clarify a little bit more for our viewers about what does it mean to run for Congress? What are the duties of a representative and why they are so crucial in politics?
Yeah, so Congress holds the power of the purse. So any federal funding that goes through both the Senate and the House, our federal budget comes through the Senate and the House. And what it means to me, what I plan to do are number one, fix the budget situation because these cuts to Medicaid and all of that are coming down the pipeline are going to be detrimental to our rural communities, but also policy advocacy and making sure that when we are implementing policies, we're doing studies and making sure that we fully understand what the outcome and what the intended and unintended impact of those policies is going to be. And also, I think that it's really important to be available to your constituents. I am currently an elected. I was elected in 2022 for our board of directors for Community Services District.
Nice.
Thank you. And I I get stopped all the time going to get coffee or lunch or whatever in town by constituents that have questions about what's going on or want to voice their concerns. And I'm very, very accessible, and I want to hear from everybody, which is part of my platform is making sure that not just Democrats. I want to represent everybody, and so I'm really listening to both sides and what concerns both sides have, and what they think the path forward is.
So it's really about representation is what I'm hearing and about accessibility. What
Yes.
about this position really made you say, I want to run for this position specifically? Was there a specific moment where it just clicked and you said, I want to run for Congress? This is the position for me? Or how did you arrive to that moment?
Honestly, I after the 2024 election, I was really angry. I felt betrayed by a lot of people around me that had voted against my livelihood, against my identities, and I was fed up. And then I started to think more and more about it, and had people ask me in the past if I had thought about running for a higher office. And I thought, let me meet with my dad, who is very far right, and see if we agree on anything because this is a red district. And so if I'm going to flip it, I'm going to have to have these conversations and really build my platform based on what we agree on. And I realized that we agree on pretty much everything. We just don't necessarily vote for the party that is in favor of that. um, so the economy and healthcare were the two biggest things that, like, so far, everybody that I've talked to agrees with me.
And so you've managed to have that kind of an eye to eye moment with voters of all sides?
Yes. Yeah. And even my neighbors across the street, like they have a picture of Trump taped to the inside of their door and Trump merch all over their house. And they're very supportive of this run because they know who I am and they know what I'm going to fight for.
So you talked a little bit about your identity. I assume that for you, your identity is a really big part of who you are in politics. I mean, you're young and you're bold. And do you think that that really reflects in your policymaking?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so you talked a little bit about your district being very red. Can you tell me a little bit more about your district as far as is it urban or is it rural and why do you think it's so red?
It's predominantly rural. The most highly populated or urbanized area is the Victor Valley area, but it's massive geographically. It covers Joshua Tree, 29 Palms, Big Bear, the Victor Valley area, and then it goes all the way out to California City. And I genuinely think that the right did a really good job of targeting rural areas and claiming that they were going to be for the working class and for the people, which we've seen in the policies and things that are happening on the federal level now that that's not the case. But not everybody has seen that yet. And so that's part of what I'm doing when I'm canvassing is having those conversations about what policies are actually being voted in and what our representative is actually doing in this office because what he puts out is very different from what is actually going on. And unless you're taking the time to really do the research and look at the policies that he is championing and voting for, you're not necessarily going to get the full picture.
Yeah. No, 100%. A lot of people have really been misled, and it's sad that it just takes a lot of research. But as a representative, how do you think that you facilitate that discussion so that all sides can have a certain level of comprehension?
I think the first and foremost, what I have found to be most successful is having a conversation with a personal story attached to it. Because once you humanize an issue, then it becomes more like, oh, this impacted somebody that I care about. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a personal story from myself. You know, I've had conversations around immigration and talked about friends that have mixed documentation families and how they're handling what's going on right now. Um, and then I also think making sure that everybody feels heard, because I think that that's something that the Democratic Party as a whole has kind of failed on for a long time at this point, is not making sure that the working class and working families really feel like they are being heard by their representatives and being heard by the people that are making these policies. And especially living in a blue state with a blue governor, every policy that comes down the pipeline, it's easy to just blame Democrats versus actually looking at what the intended purpose was and what maybe the outcome that wasn't so great ended up being.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. And along what you said, I noticed that you said the word immigration. And it reminded me about something that I was reading the other day, and that your opposition, Jay Obernolte, called the detention centers very humanitarian. What are your thoughts on that?
They're concentration camps. I mean, this facility that we have in Adelanto was shut down for inhumane treatment in 2018 and then reopened as a detention facility for migrants. And that's something that I it's very frustrating for me. It's also frustrating that no other Congress people have been able to provide oversight at that facility, just Obernolte. And now they're trying to open another in California City. And I mean, to me, there's also this fear of like, okay, we do not have that many undocumented immigrants in this country. So you're going to run out of people for these facilities at some point, and who are you going to put in them then? Um, and also, Obernolte has a ton of money invested in the private prison system, and so he's continuing to grow his net worth at the expense of the communities he's supposed to represent.
Yeah, I think his total net worth is 97 million, which is
Yep,
crazy. No politician. I mean, I can assume safely that you do not have 97 million.
I do
Yeah.
not. I don't even have
Let me ask
1,000,000.
you quickly, do you own the largest private jet that a single person can fly? And
No,
Jay Obernolte
no.
owns that. That's crazy.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so what are your thoughts on Jay Obernolte and his mismanagement?
I genuinely, so I've had conversations with a lot of people that knew him before he went to DC, and they talk really highly of the old Jay. I think that for a lot of people, um, getting that kind of power can kind of turn into something that it shouldn't be. So for me, I feel like politicians, it shouldn't be a career. I think that we should have term limits across the board. I think that we should really uplift public servants that are going to do the good of the people and not people that are going to go into office and increase their net worth to that scale. I think he started with 6 million. How do you do that? How do you do that? I don't understand. And granted, he already had a decent amount of money, but now you've been in DC for a couple of terms and you're close to $100 million flying a $12 million private jet.
Yeah, it's fishy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how do you plan to run the show differently compared to him?
First and foremost, I am very, very involved in the community. I actually had a conversation with someone today, and I was just talking and had mentioned in January, my mom's family is from North Carolina. And so after Hurricane Helene, it was still devastating in January, and that was in September. And so we flew out and we helped with some of the cleanup efforts. And I just casually mentioned that because that's like something that I did. And we were having a conversation about things that we did. And he was like, "That's wild that you just casually dropped that you flew across the country to help a community when most people won't even help their neighbors." And I'm very much like, if you need help and I can help, then I'm going to step up to the plate and I'm going to do whatever I can, whatever's in my power. I've shown repeatedly in my current elected position that I'm not going to take money that like we can be paid for our board meetings, and I have repeatedly said no. Like, I am here because I'm a public servant. I'm here because I want the younger generation in this town to have a voice at this level and have a say in what happens in our community. And that's what I want to do on the federal level, is really bring the voices of everyone to that level so that we can have policies that benefit the people and not the 1%.
100%. I really agree. And along what you're saying, my next question is, would you consider yourself progressive or are you a registered Democrat? How would you center yourself along the political aisle, or is that really something that you even want to define yourself as?
So when I decided to run, I really wanted to run as independent, because I know that it's going to be difficult to have people that have voted Republican their entire lives vote blue. And I also know that that's not a viable option. I feel disenfranchised, and like the Democratic Party has kind of left us behind. Like I think that they're Republican light at this point, and I don't want to be a Democrat, and I am running as a Democrat. I work for Planned Parenthood, and so like the second you Google my LinkedIn or hear me talk or find more information about my background, um, it's a pretty easy assumption to make, even though I stand with working families, regardless of their party.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be for the working families, regardless of their party, wherever you stand, especially if you're
Mhm.
progressive. So my next question is, what issues are you looking to tackle the most? Do you have like a specific issue, or do you have like multiple issues, or yeah?
Yeah, so my top 3, my number 1 is getting big money out of politics and overturning Citizens United. I think that we absolutely need to strip corporations of their personhood and make it so that we don't have corporations spending millions of dollars on our elections, because that's when that's when it starts to feel like my vote doesn't count and your vote doesn't count, because corporations are spending so much money to sway an election. So that's a huge one for me. Term limits, absolutely, across the board, even with the Supreme Court. I think that we need new ideas and new leadership, because if we have this like stagnant old guard, then nothing gets done, nothing changes. We don't have these new progressive ideas. So we need those new leaders to step up, and start running. Um, Healthcare is a huge one. I think that it's wild to me that we don't have universal healthcare at this point. And I think that it's something that's absolutely feasible. That's something that most people agree on, that we should have a single payer healthcare system. And then I know I said three, this is four. The final one is economic justice, because our current tax system is not working for working families. And I want to see an increase on um, taxes on the 1% and corporations, and making sure that we close those loopholes that they're taking advantage of right now, so that we can lower the tax burden on working families.
So I heard you talk about Citizens United, and I fully agree. You get that. I also did my research and saw that you were not funded by APAC.
I
What
am
are your
not.
thoughts on APAC? Do you have anything to say about that? And what do you encourage your viewers to know about APAC?
I it's I will not take APAC. I will not take a lot of PAC donations. Personally, I think that any donations that come my way, especially if it's coming from a political action committee, like, we have to align. We have to have similar morals and values, because I know that whoever's giving me that money is then going to come for a favor later. And so I will not take APAC. I will not take any corporate PAC donations, because I don't want to have to do your bidding because you maxed out on my campaign. And I'm running on a platform of, we need big money out of politics. So I'm not doing that at all. And I also find it really frustrating that, like, APAC is across the aisle, that this is not Republican or Democrat. This is, everyone is receiving this funding, and then going to kiss the wall and funding a literal genocide. And I can't get behind that.
So do you think that you're running grassroots, right?
Yes,
Do you think that there's a lot more strength to that?
absolutely. And I think that it really shows that, number one, that we have a say. And, we're getting the collective voice out to push a candidate that is progressive, that is grassroots, that's not doing things by the book and not doing things the way that the establishment has said we have to do things. So I think it's opening the door for a new generation of politics, a new type of politics that will do the bidding of the people and not the bidding of a select few. Um, and I also think that I mean, my experience so far has been that people feel like they have a voice and they're able to actually do something to make a change. We've got, I mean, I have somebody on my campaign that has never, not never, that did not vote in the last election because she felt like she didn't have a good option and she didn't feel like her vote mattered. And now she's one of my like superstar volunteers out there every weekend. She's canvassing with me, because she feels like she's making a difference by boosting a candidate that she actually believes in versus the lesser of two evils. So I think that grassroots, it gives people more of like a feeling of involvement, a feeling of my voice matters, what I care about matters. Um, and it's power of the people.
Exactly. No, you need to have the power of the people. And along those lines, with the redistricting of Newsom and his redistricting initiative, as someone who wishes to represent people, what are your thoughts on the whole redistricting efforts? How do you see it affecting you?
So It's going to make District 23 a more difficult win. And I think that Newsom is doing it the right way by putting it on the ballot and not just making a decision like Texas is doing, where they're just redrawing the maps and that's that. And actually allowing all of us to have a say in what happens. I also am not concerned about it. It's going to make the district bigger geographically, so we'll have more work to do. And also, we're going to be going into communities that no one has ever gone into, or at least not for District 23. So it'll be two new names instead of, who is Alexis? I don't know her.
That's great. Yeah. It's very exciting. I'm kind of anticipating and wondering really what's going to happen. What I'm telling people is I think that they should really vote for it. I encourage it. And I
hmm
think that Utah just followed suit. Um,
hmm
so for my closing thoughts, how can people help your campaign and how can they get involved? And what would be one thing that you'd want to tell your voters about involvement or just anything in general?
yeah. So how you can get involved, you can go to my website, which is claiborneforcongress.com. There's a way to sign up either to volunteer or just for a newsletter. We also It's expensive to run a congressional campaign. There is an option to donate. We've gotten donations anywhere from $5 to $1,000 at this point. So everything counts, everything matters, everything's helpful. And also, there are ways to get involved and volunteer across the spectrum. So, like, I have people that are not able to go out and canvass because they're not as mobile. They make phone calls for me or they do admin work for me. So there are a lot of ways that you can get involved that don't necessarily involve knocking on people's doors, which is I think what a lot of people kind of think of when they think of volunteering on a campaign. And I think it's a really, really good use of your political voice. And especially like I just had a conversation earlier today about kind of being disenfranchised with politics in general and feeling like it doesn't matter and why would I vote? This gives you a voice. This gives you someone that you can get behind that is going to back you 100%. Like I'm not in this for me. I'm in this for our communities. And I think that when we have leaders that care more about the well-being of the people and not necessarily their pocketbooks or their private jet, then we can start to see real change.
And just as another question, because I have to ask, I feel like a lot of our small communities, especially in California, have really been overlooked, and a lot of money has been going towards big cities.
Mhm.
How do you think we can help small communities? Because progress is meant to happen all over. How can we bring them in the conversation and give them a seat to the table of progress?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is putting people in office that understand small communities and also are going to adequately represent them, um, and have that kind of mentality of like, I know that we need to allocate funds for this. I know that we need to have working relationships with local governments and state governments and representatives that aren't on the federal level so that we can partner because it's supposed to be our government working for us and this is up and down the ballot. And so once we start when I say flip a seat, I don't even necessarily mean from red to blue. I mean from establishment to progressive. I mean from what we have now to the future of our politics and our government. And I think that once we start to make those changes and we on all levels, then we'll start to see real change in our local communities as well.
Well, I am anticipating seeing how your campaign unfurls. I am really happy to see somebody who's anti status quo, anti establishment, and who understands that it's about having a conversation. I really hope to see how your campaign evolves. And thank you so much for letting me interview you.